Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 270 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. I am your host, the Orange Tank, Neelan, and with me, as always, are the Green Tank, Mark.
Hey.
And the Red Tank, Callan.
Yo, yo, yo.
How are you both doing?
Good. Callan, how are you doing considering that Neelan got a 270? He got a round number.
Yeah.
That's usually your domain.
270 sounds like a score. I was like, that's not an SAT score that I'm familiar with, and I'm sure I scored higher than Neelan, certainly.
I don't think Neelan took the SATs.
270 is 3/4 of a circle. Pretty happy about that. Nice, clean number. It's 3 cubed times 10, which is also, that's a good number.
What are you going on about, Neelan?
I'm just trying to emphasize how good of a number this is. As far as like numbers to have hosted an episode for, this is probably one of the all times.
I think all non-nerds would be happier hosting 69 than 270.
Nice. Okay. So this week on the show, we're going to be talking about a little bit of a hot question about games that have made us uncomfortable. I'll spell that out a little bit more detail in the second half of the show. But before we get there, we're going to be talking about some of the games that we've been playing this week. And we're going to start off with Mark telling us about Dog Tag Trick. I'm going to be talking about my play of Deal with the Devil. And Kellen's going to be telling us about a game we all play together at Dice Tower West, Yokai Septet. So let's get right into it with Mark.
Yeah, I feel so Kellan-y with this game review. And
That's not a word.
You don't want it to be a word?
I'm saying, it's not possible, so it's sort of like unattainable.
What, that I can be Kellan-y?
Exactly.
Well, this is like as Kellan-y as I could get. I know I can never achieve it, but this is as close as I could get. And I have listener Nav to thank, who's Glomzig on the Discord. He messaged me on the Discord, letting me know that he's going to be in town, and I fortunately had my game day overlapping with the time he was going to be around, so had him over to play a couple games.
Just to be clear, though, he also invited me to this, even though I live in Southern California. So don't feel special, Mark. I just want to make sure that you feel appropriately special.
I have a feeling that Nav's board gaming tastes align closest with you of the three of us, based on our...
Wait, is Nav and Glomzig, these are separate people?
No, it's the same person. That's his
I'm
nom de
confused.
plume.
All
You know
right.
what a nom de plume is, Kellen?
You're using words I don't understand.
Yeah. So yeah, fortunate enough to have the time he was going to be in town overlap with my game day, so I had him over for a couple of games. Unfortunately, didn't get a chance to play for as long as I would have liked, but did get a chance to play a few games with him, one being a game that he brought and taught, which is the aforementioned Dog Tag Trick, another in the long line of the entries of small Japanese trick takers. So again, very Kellan-y. This is a game by Gyojin Otsubo and published by Game Nawa. Released in 2020. So the way the game works is one of the more unusual takes on trick taking, at least that I've seen. There are 4 suits whose strength is fixed from the start of the game. So there's no like trump suits or changes. It's always their fixed rankings. So in the case of a tie value in the game, Paw Pad always beats Doghouse, which always beats Water Bowl, which always beats Bone. So I know that hierarchy is intuitive to most people out there.
To the animal kingdom.
Yeah, it's part of the exactly. Tale as old as time. But in case you don't remember, it's on the player aid, but even more helpfully and more cutely, as these games sort of like often have, the Paw Pad is drawn with 4 elements. The house is drawn with 3, the bowl is drawn with 2, and the bone is just 1 element. So you can just look at the picture at a glance and know the rank, which I thought was a cute touch. But anyway, that's very tangential to the game, to how the game actually plays, obviously. So whoever leads in this trick taker has the option of playing 1 or 2 cards from their hand, and there are 3 types of plays that you can make. First, you can play a low run pair. So that's 2 numerically consecutive cards like 3, 4, 6, 7, where the lowest hand wins. So a 1, 2 is better than a 4, 5. So that's the first type of pair you can play. Instead, you can play a low pair. So this is similar, but it's like a 1, 1 is better than a 7, 7.
Fruit this time.
The fruit, right. A low pair, right. Sorry, I missed that. So that's the second type of thing you can do. And then finally, the third type of pair that you can play is high. This is a high pair, Callan. So this is up on the tree.
Yeah.
But it's actually not a high pair. You made me say pair when I didn't want to.
Shooting the partridge.
This is a high multiple of 5. So 1, you can do lowest consecutive. 2, you can do low pair. 3, you can do high multiple of 5. So here you could play 2 cards that add to a multiple of 5. So you could play a 1-4, you could play 3-7, you could play 5-10. And the strength of your pair is determined by the higher of the 2 cards that you play. So if I play a 1-9 and you play a 7-8, my high card 9 beats your high card 8, even though my cards add up to 10 and yours add up to 15. Those are the 3 types of pairs you can play. You can never play a 3 of kind. You can never play a run of 3 cards. It's only 2 cards ever, and it's only a pair, a run of 2 cards, or a multiple of 5. Anyhow, so whoever leads the trick sets the type of trick, and then everyone follows if they want, not if they can. So this is not a must-follow trick taker in addition. Whoever wins the trick gets 3 points, and whoever finishes second gets 1 point. So that's how the base scoring works. So I mentioned you don't have to follow. You can instead choose to play any type of the 3 pairs that I mentioned to get rid of cards out of your hand. This will make more sense later, but if I lead with a low pair and you don't want to follow, you can't follow for whatever reason, you can play a low run, which means that you won't win any points, but you're going to get those cards out of your hand. In addition, you can always play just a single card instead of whatever is leading. And then at the end of any trick, whoever plays the strongest single card gets a point. So if you don't think you can win, or if you're playing last in a hand and know you can't win, you can often snake a point by just playing a single card. So instead of like having to play a pair and finishing second and getting a point that way, if you have a high card, you can just play that and try to take a point that way. The final twist goes back to why you'd want to burn cards out of your hand, which is whenever the first player runs out of cards during a round, that is considered the last trick. So whoever is out of cards signifies the last trick, and then whoever wins that trick wins 5 points instead of 3, and nobody gets a score for second place. So it's just really simple, considering there's only 3 types of pairs you can play game, that has a number of interesting considerations, because sometimes it's good to keep low cards for the 2 types of pairs that reward low value cards. Other times it's good to keep high cards for that multiple of 5 thing, or for that single card play where you always want high cards. Then you add to that the tempo consideration, where sometimes you just want to burn through cards if you think you can position yourself to win that last hand. Like if you can see yourself setting up a couple wins at the end, you might want to burn some cards out of your hand to get yourself a situation where you know you're going to win the last trick, and therefore get 5 and deprive anybody else of any points. Add to that, there's the normal amount of adorableness that you'd expect from these Japanese trick takers, where each card shows a different breed of adorably drawn dog, where the low numbers are small breeds and the big numbers are larger breeds. Just all that together made for a really delightful little game that I really, really enjoyed. Maybe not the most sophisticated or complicated trick taker, but one I certainly wouldn't mind owning myself, knowing that it's super easy to teach. And again, super, super cute. Not to mention, it's not without its difficult considerations. There's plenty of decisions to be made. So that is Dog Tag Trick by Jiu-Jin Atsubo and published by Game Nawa.
Interestingly, he is the artist as well.
Oh,
cards,
I did not even know that. Oh, that's very, very cool.
You have played a Sharf Sharten recently, game I can't pronounce, and Yokai Septet, which you can't say anything about because we're about to talk about it in the near future. But like, how does this rank for you in the trick takers? Because I think, these guys are buying all of them, which is dumb. So should you own this one over other ones?
I mean, this is going to be, if you are a trick taking aficionado, if you have a lot of in your collection, this is certainly, I would imagine, going to be one of the more breezy ones. Again, I don't want to spoil Yokai Septet, but the tension in this game versus the tension in Yokai Septet is like night and day. You have those moments of anticipation where you're going for that last trick and you get a little bit, like your heart starts racing a little bit, but it's not like a super crunchy, I've got to get my cards in just the right way sort of thing.
Is that like I'm getting beat up in the round, Mark's winning everything, but I'm going to get him at the end with kind of a shoot the moon type feeling?
No, not necessarily. I don't think it's a situation where you can see a player otherwise tanking and they're going to like do a last minute thing. I mean, you are a little bit, because if you're burning cards to be able to control tempo, you are therefore going to be sacrificing. Usually you're sacrificing points, but it's not like an all or nothing strategy. And it's also interesting because we noticed, like in the first couple of hands we played, we were very aware of that and very cautious about that. So there'd be a lot of like making sure we had an idea of how many cards everybody had, and then also keeping strong cards in your hand for like a defensive maneuver at the end. So it made for like an interesting play.
Cool. I'm jealous I did not get to play it.
Nav asked you to play and everything, so
would have loved an invite.
Don't blame him.
Okay, I'm going to be talking about Deal with the Devil. This was a review copy sent to us by CGE and designed by Matthias Kotri, who is formerly Yes, who is still alive, and formerly has designed Alchemist, one of my absolute favorite games, also previously with CGE. So this was one that had been highly anticipated for me because I'm such a huge fan of the game. It's been a while since he's designed anything. The premise of Deal with the Devil is that this is a fairly heavy 4-player only Euro game. So I guess I'm on a weird streak of talking about specifically 4-player only games, but this could not be more different from Defense of Procyon, which I talked about last week.
That's a real star.
Yes, that is the real place, Kellen.
You tell me, you science nerd.
I did say in the episode that I thought it was a star, but I don't know if it was. I knew it was a real star. That is cool. That is thematic.
We protect each other here. That's one of the rules, and these two collectively forgot to protect me, so I look like the dummy. Though, who can say if we've never been to the moon? So if we've never been to the star, then it's not real. Who can say if it's real or not?
Actually, be there. Deal with the Devil, though. The devil is definitely real, and he's in the details. And the details about Deal with the Devil, wow, how's that for a segue? The details about Deal with the Devil are that the way that this works is that is a 4-player only, semi-asymmetric heavy Euro game. So the premise is that every one of the 4 players is assigned one of 3 different roles. So there are 2 mortals, there's 1 cultist, and 1 devil. But the main difference between those roles is kind of the resources they start with. So the mortals start with 3 pieces of their soul. The cultist has 2 pieces of soul. They've already sold 1 piece of their soul to the devil. The devil starts with no soul. In fact, instead, he starts with an abundance of resources. So wood, stone, wheat, your sort of classic Euro building resources. And what that means is that he's best...
Sorry. The devil... Everybody has lost a piece of their soul, but the devil, to make up for it, has wood, stone, wheat.
So much stone, so much wood, so much wheat.
Thematic, very thematic. Okay.
Exactly, 100%. So what they're best equipped to be able to do is to start getting to the Euro meat of the game very quickly, which is, as you might expect, is turning those resources into buildings, getting yourself special powers, boosting your production to get more of these resources in order to do these things more and more efficiently to generate victory points. Whoever has the most victory points at the end of the game wins. But the core twist here, the core gimmick, the thing that makes this really, really neat is what that means is that each player has a sort of a unique chest assigned to them. So you can imagine this as like this triple thick inset cardboard chest that swivels open that hides some of your resources that you can then close up. So from the outside, all of the chests look identical. And at regular intervals in the game, so once per round, there's a trading phase. You're going to open up your chest, you're going to put a bunch of resources in as an offer to another player, and then some sort of value representing what you want in exchange. So most typically, for say the devil player, they're trying to get pieces of soul. So they might say, hey, look, I have a ton of stuff. Here is 3 stone, here's 3 wood, here's a lot of cool stuff that I bet you really, really want, but in exchange, I want 1 piece of your soul. They close it up and they put it in the middle. The mortals, on the other hand, they don't have a lot of resources to start with, but they do have pieces of soul. So they might be tempted to accept an offer like that. But they're making smaller offers just to turn their small amounts of resources into slightly larger resources. You're going to shuffle up all of these chests and then scan them into an app, which is going to distribute them randomly to every player. So what you receive is an offer for trade that you know has come from a specific role. That chest is allocated, is marked. It says, hey, this deal comes from the devil, but you don't necessarily know which player the devil is. So you're kind of making deals, exchanges, trades with roles without knowing specifically which player you're trading with. And that's kind of the core premise of the game. The way that the app slickly distributes these apps with a quick scan, hey, hand this chest to this player. Quick scan, hey, hand this chest to this player, is really, really well done.
Is this like intentionally meta thematic to like cheating in Euro games? Where you're like, I need 1 more clay to upgrade my houses in Agricola and I can sell my soul to the devil and just take 1 from the box?
I mean, maybe. I wouldn't put it past them because there's a lot of fun stuff that is like very thematically tied. I haven't spoken really about the theme of this at all, but your sort of medieval rulers and there's the church. Like one of the backgrounds to all of this is that there's the church, there's the Inquisition that is coming down, trying to track down people that don't have soul. There's like a witch hunt phase where you can accuse another person of saying, hey, I bet you Mark does not have 3 pieces of his soul, either because he's already traded one away or he's the devil and hasn't acquired pieces of soul yet. So there's this light element of social deduction that sneaks in occasionally where you're trying to like figure out, suss out who another player is.
Are those moments resolved through the app, or how does that work? How integrated is the app, out of curiosity?
So the app is actually largely...
2 ways, right?
Wait, what?
Two-way integration?
Two-way app?
It's not a two-way communication app, no. Much to its my disappointment. Oh yeah, after Dark Tower, there's no going back. But no, there are just a couple of phases that involve the exchange of resources and presenting resources, Mark, where the anonymity is important. But for this witch hunt phase, it's literally, oh no, multiple people think Kellen doesn't have pieces of soul. So therefore, at that point, Kellen would have to prove he has pieces of soul. He would just show, oh no, I have these 3 pieces of soul. At that point, he hasn't given away his role yet, right? Like he could be someone that's acquired soul or someone that just hasn't sold their soul yet. But there's some element of like an undercurrent to why does Kellen have soul or why doesn't he have soul?
Speaking of not knowing other people's roles, and sorry to torpedo your explanation here, how does the devil player who starts with the resources, how are they not given away at the beginning of the game when you're like assigning role? Like I get like you get a card that says, hey, you're the devil, but like since the devil starts out with different resources, how is that resolved?
It's like why has Mark built a fence and a hut and a house on the first round and everyone's looking at him all funny?
Right.
And to be fair, that very thing is part of the spirit of the game, right? Which is, well, I have the means to do all of these things, but do I want to lay low for a little bit longer? But in terms of the actual mechanics of it, though, Mark, it's like those chests that are handed out, those are what tell you your role. And they're seeded, they're pre-seeded with the resources.
Gotcha.
There are also giant cardboard shields, like really quite giant cardboard shields, which are quite nice because they also have almost a ceiling to them, so you can get your resources quite well hidden in there. You have a lot of room to work with both hands without really giving away anything that you're doing. So really at the start of the game, everyone opens their chest and it's kind of like daintily takes the pieces out without like revealing what you're doing, which actually the game supports quite well. If anything, I would say that all of the ways that this game works mechanically are really, really well handled. If I haven't given away too much already, I think that the way that this kind of falls down is the rest of the core is about as generic a Eurogame as you can get, where, you are trading for resources, you're using them to build buildings. Sometimes those buildings have powers. There are little events that you can use. You're moving up multiple tracks. The people on those tracks get rewarded at regular intervals. Depending on certain goals you hit, you're going to get more points. It just doesn't really do anything exciting in any of the Euro mechanics, but it doesn't undercut that by reducing its complexity. It's very procedural. There's a lot to take in. This was a 45-minute rule teach. This was a 3-hour game after that rule teach. And while we thoroughly enjoyed the process of playing it, I think we kind of all reflected back and thought, I kind of just wish there was more to that wasn't just how cool and clever the system was. It kind of felt like if you took that core of the chests and the trading and you just baked that down into a simpler game with the app support, you could come up with something really, really cool, really fun, and really creative.
But it's like made for you, Neelan. You love alchemists. You believe the devil's real. You like heavy Euro games and social deduction.
I mean, this kind of hits against some of the walls that I was talking about a little bit last week with Defense of Procyon, really, which is to say that it's so niche-y, though. It's like you have to find 3 other heavy gamers. Like, I know right now, after having even played it once, I would not want to teach this again. I would only want to play it with those 3 players again. And that's so specific. You're going to play a heavy Euro game that isn't an especially good Euro game for the sake of this mechanic that is quite good. I was very intrigued, and we all were at the end of this. It's like, I feel like my game would be very different if I was the devil versus whether I was a mortal, because the mortals both felt like they were starved for resources. Like that core decision of when do I sell my soul to get like a good deal was the thrust of their game, whereas myself as the cultist, primarily what I'm trying to do is get my soul sold to the devil. So there's fun interplays between the way each of the roles work, but I wish that the core game was slightly stronger.
You can buy anything you want with money.
True. That is Deal with the Devil by Matthias Kotri and CGE.
We all had a chance to play another trick-taking game at Dice Tower West. And I have to thank Monique and Naveen, but mostly Monique because she's cooler than Naveen, of Before You Play for continually recommending this one to me over and over again. I don't know if it was the Japanese theme or the trick taking, but this is a partnership trick taker that uses a lot of standard trick taking mechanisms with just a few little twists that I can describe here. In this game, you have a partner, and it doesn't matter if you win a trick or your partner wins a trick because it goes to your side or your score pile. And the goal of the game is to try to capture the yokai. I think they're all yokai. These are demons. I could read this. I mean, I know people might say, oh, Kellen, read it to us. I don't know, maybe. A long time ago, in the land of the rising sun, spirits and demons known as yokai were harming human lives. Yokai did not directly attack people, but they were causing supernatural disasters. Yokai caused farmlands to burn, rivers to flood, thunders to roll, and diseases to spread. Surprised you haven't stopped me because this is the first paragraph. 4. One day, a chieftain of a nearby village visited an omiyami, a practitioner of Japanese esoteric cosmology.
That's enough. That's fine.
Cosmology. Though your knowledge of astronomy and occultism...
Are you sure it's not cosmetology?
It is simple. The more yokai you manage to capture, the less menace caused by these demons. Okay, I actually physically can't read this at all, even though we could stick this in the outro. My reading comprehension is not good enough. Each suit has a boss yokai, the 7. And that card is holographic, which is awesome. And the goal of the game is to win tricks in which the boss yokai are played in. But what's unique is that through the suits, sometimes the 7 is the highest card in a suit, and sometimes it's all the way to the lowest card in the suit. So there are 7 suits: wind, earth, charm, lightning, darkness, fire, and snow, the strongest suit. And it is a standard trick taker in terms of you play a card, you must follow if you can. If you can't, you can play the trump suit, which is randomly chosen before the game. But really, all you're trying to do is get to 4 boss yokai, 4 of those 7s, and then the round will end and you will score points based on how many sort of symbols there are on the boss yokai that you captured. Any boss yokai that are in the opponent's hands, you also get. But there is also a lose state. And that lose state is if you win 7 tricks, but you've only gotten 3 or fewer boss yokai. So what that means is when you draw a hand and you have a boss yokai in it, you're simultaneously excited because you've got a shiny holographic card and you have to pretend not to shimmy your hand so that it like sort of reflects in the light because you're excited about that. And then you have to figure out, how do I get this in a trick where I'm going to win or my opponent is going to win? And then the fun of the game, one of the best parts of the game, is the limited communication that you can do with your partner, by way of being able to send them 3 cards before the round starts. So everyone goes 3, 2, 1, they put down 3 cards, they pass it to their partner, and then the round starts. There are a few other wrinkles. It probably doesn't matter. There's one card marked A for awesome, and that card is in the lowest suit, but it wins all the suits because it is awesome. That is Yokai Septet. I loved it. 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 It was so tense, and really just had all the hallmarks of trick taking that I liked, with that sort of feeling of wanting to understand what my Podna was doing, who in this case was Neelan. And Mark, what did you think of Yokai Septet?
Yeah, I really liked it a lot as well. It was probably among my top 3 games at the convention. I'm not as immersed in trick takers as you are, so every time I play one, it feels like a brand new experience. But yeah, like you said, I liked the partnership aspect of it. It was fun, if tense. But yeah, the way that you are sort of incentivized, obviously, to win the tricks, because you need to win the tricks in order to get the 4 gods to your side. But you need to make sure that those wins count, because if you win worthless tricks, you are quickly approaching the lose state. So that was just a really interesting tension. I don't think I've ever played a trick taker that had that, where there were times when we were playing it. I don't know if anybody ever hit the lost state, but there were certainly times when we were playing where one side had won a number of tricks, but weren't really approaching the win state. And there was almost the idea of like, hey, is there any way we can force them to win a trick and push them to that lost state, which was just an interesting thing to consider when it comes to trick taking.
Yep. There is that element where your partner plays a really high card in a suit and you're like, yes, I'm going to put the boss yokai in. We're going to win this. But the other team has that one chance, if they don't have that suit, then they can trump you and like steal it from you.
Right.
And so there's that tension of even on those tricks where you're just sort of throwing cards away, like you're hoping to throw away a good card in the right one when it matters.
Right.
There were just a lot of those moments where I really, really enjoyed this one. I'm really eager to get back to the table and really glad to have. Hey, Neelan, what did you think of Yokai Septet?
I hated it. So what we like to do in the middle of the show here is talk about some of the things that we have going on in the rest of our community. We have a Discord, which we would love to see you hang out on. If you have some thoughts about other games we've been talking about, that is at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. And you can come chat with us there. You can come hang out and talk about some of the stuff that we've been playing with other people in the community. One thing we also like to highlight in the middle here are reviews that we've received. This is still one of the easiest and best ways to support the show. Of course, we're super grateful to everyone over at Patreon, but if you're not willing or not able to support us in that way, reviews are a good way to just get the word out to the larger public, though they make the podcast more visible to more people. To promote that, we like to read some of our favorite reviews. Here's one that we received this week, which says, "Best podcast ever created" is the title,
Ever.
which is ever created.
You can underline ever, you can underline best, you can underline created.
Yep, sure. The rest of the review goes as follows. Board Game Barrage is my favorite board game podcast. The tanks have great chemistry and always give concise, insightful reviews of both the latest hotness and underrated gems. The podcast has an amazing Discord community where people often get together in person and online to play and discuss games. I recently participated in the contest, which was organized by Dave on the Discord. Contestants tried to see how long they could go without buying new games this year. I lost recently because I played Arkham Horror the card game, which was locked in my vault as part of the mandatory contest challenges. I then proceeded to buy Blue Lagoon in favor of the BGB crew. Listening to the BGB podcast each Thursday is a highlight of my week. Keep up the good work.
Super, super nice.
And that is by Jux K, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Thank you so much for that review. That's very, very kind.
Take that, Serial. Best podcast ever created.
Well, they kind of undid their title with the next sentence. Like, I don't mean to critique our friends, but they said best podcast ever created, and then the first sentence is favorite board game podcast. So I feel like Serial still reigns supreme, though only season 1 Serial. I feel like season 1 Serial, then Board Game Barrage, then season 2.
Fair.
Sure. Okay, I'll accept that.
But yeah, if you want to leave us a review, you can do that on Apple Podcasts or on whatever podcast app you use that supports reviews. There aren't really that many of them, but wherever you can find a place to leave a review, we would super appreciate that. Let's get into the second half with the meat of the episode, which is a hot question.
Been too long. Been too long.
It has been too long. Okay, everybody. Absolutely apropos to nothing that we've spoken about previously in this episode, what are some board games that made you uncomfortable? I'm going to start us off real quick.
Okay.
Sorry to cut you off.
It's so hot, it's burning a hole on his tongue.
Yokai Septet. So, the premise of this game is it's a 2v2 game.
Quote-unquote game.
Yes, exactly. This experience I lived through. Now, here's the thing. Now, look, I love a co-op game, despite claims to the contrary that seem to be going around Discord. I love a game where you have to rely on your teammates. You sort of have to work together to achieve a goal. I like some partnership games, even. Something about the specifically obtuse nature of the Yokai Septet's communication, which is to say that you are not allowed to openly talk about what's in your hand by the nature of the design. You're supposed to be communicating what your intent is through the cards that you hand off, right? And couple that with having lowly little new-to-trick takers Neelan with trick taker God himself, Helen, as my partner.
Oh, why'd you call him that?
The intense pressure that poor Neelan felt at every point in this game to not feel like he was f***ing up and letting Daddy Callan down. Just, it got to me in a way that I genuinely can't remember a game ever melting through the core of kind of my confidence, like my ego, and getting to like the heart of things that kind of felt like primal to me almost, in ways that I avoid social situations where I kind of feel like I'm being judged and I feel like I don't want to be perceived in certain ways. It really, really got at a heart of me that I didn't know was still there, where I just kind of felt incapable of playing well. And it's not necessarily a fault of, this is something that's very much a me problem, I admit, but there is something that was so specific about the design that like razored in on that. And even while like I could admire some of the things it was doing in that trick-taking space, it was wild, like how uncomfortable it made me in the moment. We kind of came away with this a big discussion, more about like the incident than the game itself at that point in time. It was a lot.
Yeah, it was like, there are a couple things. One, in that moment, right, we've waited the appropriate amount of time since the convention to talk about it, because I realized in that moment was not the time to talk to Sun Neelan about his trick-taking performance. I think that I know exactly how you're feeling because I felt that way the first time I played Teach You with some board game nerds at a game night at a bar in New York. And like there were all these conventions, and like the games aren't that complicated, so it's not the case where it's just like complex Euro game. It was like a language I didn't know. But what I will say is like I actually before the game started was doing everything possible not to try hard for your sake. You know what I mean? Like, because we lost, and it was Neelan's fault, but at no point did I want you to feel that way. And I felt like I didn't come off like I was like angry or upset, because I've actually had other experiences in like games like Hanabi where everyone around me like seems to have some secret code that they're cheating at Hanabi, and I'm the only one who doesn't get it. So I was just so surprised that was your takeaway, because at least I thought that my exterior was calm, cool, and collected, and you were just sitting there.
Every time you lose a trick, you didn't even realize this, but you were stamping your foot, and the whole table went up.
And you go this like constantly shaking your head. No. I will absolutely grant you that you were being lovely. There was no point in this that you were like making any sort of display of being frustrated or anything like that, even at a point that I would consider totally normal for being frustrated at losing in a board game. You know what I mean? I think that your demeanor was absolutely on point, and I will absolutely give you credit for that. I also think, like, our friendship is tight enough that we're past the point where I have this barrier of, like, trying to impress you or anything like that I would normally have with most people that I'm less familiar with. It really was just something that was on a very subconscious level. And one of the things that Christina actually emphasized at the time, I think, was that it's the very nature of the fact that because there's no communication. Like, a lot of the times when you have like a social issue with someone, the best way through it is to talk through it, And because the nature of the game means you sort of just have to like sit with all of those mistakes, they just keep drilling further and further into my brain.
Not only do you have to sit with those mistakes, not only is there no communication, but the opportunity for communication is the 3 cards you pass your teammate. And it's like, you're not communicating, but you're forced to communicate in a language you don't have any grasp of.
That's exactly it. And especially in the context of, like a genre that I am less familiar with. It's exactly right, Mark. Like, it kind of just felt like the one outlet I had to be like, okay, Kellen, I don't know if I'm doing this right, but let me just try this thing. It's not conveyed through English. It's conveyed through, I think, these cards.
Yeah, what am I trying to tell him with these 3 cards? What is he telling me with the cards he just gave me? Like, what is going on? Yeah.
But it's like, I just seriously wanted to sit there and talk to you. I was like, what did you think when I passed you those 3 cards? Because I thought we got better at communicating in the second round than the first round, where we started passing each other our boss yokai. And I was like, okay, he's going to cue in on what that means. But in your mind, you're just sitting there going like, what the does Kellen mean? Like the whole time?
Exactly. Pretty much.
Yeah.
I will say that I will point out that this is an experience that I have mildly had in the past with The Crew, for example, and for very similar reasons. Like, The Crew relies on trick-taking language, and it relies on you being in tandem with other players at the table. I've actually owned The Crew because I don't mind it so much because it's cooperative. So even though I felt that uncomfortability the first time I played it, I kind of got over that curve, and especially as I got more familiar with what The Crew demands of you for a trick taker, it kind of felt like a more of a communal experience. But this being specifically like me and Kellen versus Christina and Mark, I think really got to the heart of it. But anyway, I think we've rambled on about that enough. I am curious to get to your guys' takes on like some experiences that kind of have left you feeling maybe not similarly uncomfortable, but uncomfortable in a similar sort of way.
So the uncomfortable feeling in board games that I want to bring up, it's from a privileged position. I think this has sort of been exacerbated by the fact that we sort of churn through a lot of games for the podcast. But one thing that I've noticed in myself is just a lower tolerance for games that, in my opinion, of course, this is just a subjective thing, don't really offer anything. As I mentioned before, listener Nav came over this last weekend to play games with my game group, and the first game that we played was Streets, which is the follow-up to Villagers, and this wasn't aided by the fact that we were playing it for the first time and we're sort of going through the rules a little bit as we were playing, which is not the ideal way, I think, to play games, but I just found the game, even once we understood it and got rolling on it, just completely blah. Like, it was a game, it was sound in that respect, but just didn't really offer anything interesting. The choices felt pretty rote, and normally I would have been sort of like more okay with that. There was a time where I was just happy to play games. I think a lot of people experienced that early in their introduction to the hobby, but as we were playing it, I just felt like, and especially since I had a guest over and I wanted to like play fun games with them, just felt like, wow, this game is not really offering very much at all. I think that we, the four of us, have had situations where we've, again, because of the nature of the show, we want to go through a lot of games, where we've played games and we've been able to counteract that by being able to like trash talk either the game itself or each other, and that has sort of like deflected that tension. And again, because we play games so much over and over again, that anxiety or that unease that I felt during my play of Streets is mitigated because we can all just say, hey, this isn't great, let's just end this or whatever. And again, I had a guest over and we were playing this for the first time, so I didn't feel comfortable doing that. But yeah, I feel like in general, games that aren't offering anything interesting, I've just grown shorter and shorter with.
And it's like, that's a feeling that grows the more games you play, basically.
Yeah, I think so. I think, again, as I mentioned, like when you're first in the hobby, I'll play anything, whatever. I'll play a 4-hour game that is just like maybe just above average. I'll play a real quick game that is nothing and be sort of okay with it. And to be honest, like a shorter game, even a bland shorter game isn't really a problem. But if you even ask for like an hour and a half and don't really offer anything, I feel like that has crossed the line for me from being like fun to now it's just sort of boring. And now I'm like sort of just uncomfortable about it because it feels like just time wasted where I could have been playing other fun games or whatever. Just something I notice about my own thresholds and, what I'd be able to take.
I think it's funny because I would describe that as like my tolerance versus being uncomfortable. Yeah. But I do feel like, I fell off a deep end a couple of years ago and I just start like screeching about stuff halfway through a game. But I thought that was my own personality. So it's nice to know you're in the muck with me. Right. Kelleny, as they say.
That's right.
I think there is something that's so specific about this that I think is a little bit of like podcast brain coming through, which is if I am in the middle of a longer game where I'm clearly enjoying less than the other people at the table, one of the things that Kel and I have spoken about is wanting to talk about and deconstruct a game while you're playing it. But when I kind of just feel like I just want to say so many things about like how this isn't working, but everyone else is clearly having a good time, so I just don't want to be that person. That tension between when, you clearly have issues with the game that you're playing, but you don't want to be that person at the table that's just going to like it, basically.
Sure, yeah, right.
Yeah, that also gets to me a lot. I think it is a function of, honestly, the number of games that you end up playing, because this is not a judgment thing at all, but there are any number of people that only ever play like a very small pool of games, like the sort of stuff you see in a Target, for example.
Yeah.
And it is very hard to then put aside all the rest of your hobby board gaming experience and like kind of tastes when you're like entrenched in that zone again.
I think it also, though, does serve as like a, maybe warning is not the right word, but just something to maybe learn from the experience of others. Like, you get into the hobby and you, not everybody, but most people have done this where they just like, they'll play whatever. Their collection is growing at an exponential pace. It's just good to put out there that, hey, you'll probably get to a point where you are not going to be willing to play games that are just okay. Everybody has to sort of learn on their own, and I think that's like a natural process, but it's sort of good to just put out there like, hey, spend your valuable time on the better games. And that's, again, Kellen has sort of mentioned this as part of the reason that we're even here, is to like sort out the good from the bad so, listeners don't have to waste their time and money.
So I have a few examples, and I think mine is closer to Neelan in terms of sort of just the straight ego of it. I think, and I may have told the story on the podcast before, One of my earliest memories is playing Pictionary in the first grade or thereabouts and getting asked to go to the front of the room and draw, what I had on my card. And what I had on my card was Afro, and I didn't know what it was. And it was just like complete panic. And like most of the other people knew what it was, and like I felt like an idiot. Again, there's like cultural questions we can raise about that now, but at the time, like I just felt stupid. And so often there are games where there are like cultural references. For instance, like even on the podcast, anytime we talk about the Beatles, it's like I'm just like a dumbass. Do you know what I mean? Like, so we play like Time's Up, Title Recall with the actual cards, and like people are like, flying back and forth with these references to like song titles. And I just like, I wasn't really allowed to listen to this or didn't listen to it. Or what is that game where it's the animals and you have the map and you're like,
oh, like Fauna?
Fauna. And this game is literally like, oh, here's an animal and put a cube on what country you think it's from, and everyone at the table is like in one quadrant and I'm just like over here in North America and people are just like snickering at me for placing the cube there. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not a zoologist. I don't know anything about these animals.
Wits and Wages does that to me a lot sometimes as well, where it's kind of like you see so many people with like a specific number and you're like way off and you're like, oh, wait, I legit just thought it was that big.
Yeah. When you're off by like a magnitude of like 100 times.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
Like how many feet tall is this
And then
building?
everyone's just like, whoa, when they see your number. I'm like, oh, shit.
Totally. But there, and I don't know if I've talked about this on the show before. I played, and thank God, unreleased with Optimal Play, a friend, Brandon of the Discord. We filmed a video for a 2-player social deduction game called Inhuman Conditions. And this is a game where one player is either a human or a robot. And through a role-playing game that's like 10 minutes long, you have to prove whether you're a human or not. You're sort of being like investigated. And this game made me feel so uncomfortable. Have you played this, Neelan?
No, I haven't, because I know it would do the same thing to me. Like, it gets so close to like the role-playing bias that I have, which I don't think I could do it.
It's like if you're a robot, you have some like sub-condition that you have to change how you talk, but like you have to like pretend to be someone else, and then they're like, what did you do for dinner last night? And then you're just like straight role-playing. Like there's not any other game going on.
A little bit like a Fog of Love situation.
Yeah, but like there's like a winner and you could win or lose. This is made by the people who made Secret Hitler, so it's like a legit well-ranked game on Board Game Geek, but like I just had this feeling like I was just a dumbass the whole game. No matter what, I can't even remember if I ever won or lost, but like it was just a pure distillation of role-playing applied to something that you could be good or bad at, and I was bad.
Right.
Okay? It was like stand-up comedian, but bad. So that will never be seen by the world, thank God. But yeah, Inhuman Conditions, like I still might rank as the most uncomfortable I've ever felt playing a board game. And one last one, actually, that's notable and worth tagging is more recent, which I'm sure Mark and Neelan were thinking about, but I'm willing to say it. I'm willing to come out and say it. One of Jordan Draper's games, in the same line as Colorful, a game that we quite like, is this game called Praise. And it's like, for whatever reason, and the reason is that I'm an is that it's really easy for me to criticize people, but very hard for me to offer sincere praise for people. And this game is literally like one person is giving a fake praise and then the rest are giving real praise?
No, one person's giving real praise. The other two are giving fake praise.
Yeah, but it's like literally we're all there late at night looking at each other after drunk sushi, and it's like, say something you genuinely like about Mark. And I just like can't do it. I'm so uncomfortable with the process. Like, it's like not that I don't have anything nice to say. I just couldn't do it. I can't even figure out what it was, but it was such a departure from sort of, and again, I want to stress, like, as we're joking, but like, I'm not joking. Like, I do think that's not a good thing. I think in general, if you have a proclivity towards like radical honesty, like you would hope that that would extend both up and down for praise and, whatever the opposite of praise is. Criticism. But in the context of this game, my God, it was like more like a social experiment that like from my nightmares. I had a really hard time getting into praise. Were you guys even mildly uncomfortable with praise as a concept?
I was mildly uncomfortable because, as I think we mentioned, like part of the whole thing is that you have to give the praise, be it the real or not, based on a way that the card dictates. So it's like, say it angrily, or say it while winking, or say it while something, and that makes it a little goofier than I felt super comfortable with. But
it's sort of like the opposite of true colors, right? Like is what we were sort of talking about. But like it felt weird to be giving genuine praise for something. Like you'd write them like a nice thank you note, except only one person is being honest about it. Like it felt like this weird mesh of like kindness and like you. Like there was like both there. What a weird game.
It is also just actually, this didn't really occur to me until you like described it, but like even just conceptually the idea, I'm going to praise you the best as I can in order to win this point is kind of dark in a weird way. So I get it on some level.
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, not cool. I felt very uncomfortable, but
did you have as much problem getting praise as you clearly did giving?
Well, I'm kind of used to that.
So that is going to do it for that hot question. And that is going to do it for this episode. Before we close out, Mark, did you have something you wanted to talk about?
Longtime listener Kelly, who's on our Discord, and actually I was trading with him years before the podcast even started. We were frequent trade partners via math trades or just direct trades on BGG. Found out we were both Liverpool fans. We both talked about the team. Anyway, I know that you're going through a difficult period now, and just wanted you to know that we are thinking about you and hope everything goes well.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that is cool about the Discord is how human it can be at times.
Yeah.
Like we kind of talk up a lot about how it's a good place to play games and yada, yada, yada. But really the people there and like how lovely they are and the kindness of it and the fact that we can connect with people on a way that's different from just playing games with people is really, really cool. Super, super, super gratifying. That is going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you all so much for listening. You can find that Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord if you want to talk to us. Otherwise, you can reach out on all of our social media at Twitter. We're on Facebook and everywhere else you might imagine except TikTok yet? ? Thank you as always.
No, we're not. That's banned by the U.S., Neelan.
That's right.
Stay in America.
Yeah. Thank you as always to Heart Society for our intro and outro music. What's on your mind, kid? Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Everyone good?
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 2. Oh, thank you. Yes.
That's how I like to get your attention.
Yeah. Just every now and again, just a quick clap. It's very effective. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 270 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. Deal with the devil, though. The devil is definitely real, and he's in the details. And the details about Deal with the Devil... Wow, how's that for a segue? The details about Deal with the Devil are that...
It's real. Put that on the box.
Exactly.
Board Game Barrage.
We're going to smooth that over. That over, Mark. This is going to be seamless. You don't put this in the outro, you bastard.
He's real.